With every meal you make, every bite you take, and everything you bake, you have the potential to change the world. For the better or for worse, that's up to you. Now, with the vast number of choices now readily available for us consumers, the importance of wise decisions has never been so vital. Buying a steak, purchasing some eggs, or even picking up some bacon for breakfast tomorrow are all seemingly harmless decisions that don't cause any consequences. But these little things all add up. Animal-based food products are the main culprit of the devastation and destruction of both our planet and ourselves. Now, imagine a lifeless world filled to the brim with dying ecosystems, toxic pollutants choking out clean air, oceans without fish, and thousands of species gone and dying off. Oh, wait, that's familiar. Significant issues such as pollution, deforestation, deadly diseases, and climate change, just to name a few, are all directly impacted by the popular food items that we choose to purchase and consume. Therefore, reducing the demand for meat and animal products is the key to a sustainable lifestyle in order to glorify God and to thrive. Today, I will be examining key elements of the current animal agriculture industry, including the impacts it has on human health, as well as the toll it takes on our planet, including the ethical importance. I will also explain how critical this subject is for both present and future generations, and why everyone must realize the importance of this topic. Then finally, I will address how we should respond as Christians. Now, before I explain the impacts of the industry itself, we must first recognize several definitions essential to the American food industry, since it is incredibly broad and hard to understand in detail. Now, Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines agriculture as, quote, the science, art, or practice of cultivating the soil, producing crops, and raising livestock, and, in varying degrees, the preparation and marketing of the resulting products. I will mainly be focusing on animal agriculture institutions that are common in the United States, such as factory farms, which are also known as intensive animal farming. Carl Weber, author of the book Food, Inc., defines factory farms as, quote, industrial-scale facilities where tens of thousands of animals are crowded together in tight conditions and cannot carry out normal behaviors such as grazing, rooting, and pecking. Now, the modern system of producing animal products relies on cheap and quickly produced products, and factory farms in turn rely on the reduction of these expenses. Two major expenses in this business is land and labor. And factory farms seem to be perfect because there's less room for animals, therefore there's less labor, and as well as close confinement, which saves on space. In fact, most animal-based food products today come from factory farms. The majority of meat and dairy sold in the US are from these institutions. Yet, despite the high concentration of these farms across the US, most citizens will never see or even set foot inside of one, despite eating their products on a daily basis. The frightening and perhaps shocking effects of these industries on both a public and individual level is something we all need to become aware of in order to protect both ourselves, our future, and our planet. Now, through trying to create a convenient and simplified method of producing animal-based food products, the American meat industry has instead created a plethora of health issues for its innocent consumers. These health issues have become a trademark of American society, with thousands and thousands of people needlessly suffering the effects of such dangerous and damaging foods. Now, by food, I mean animal products, mainly meat and dairy. In his enlightening book called Back to Eden, Jethro Kloss, an herbalist, entrepreneur, and advocate of natural healing, shares his research on food-based illness. He describes how Dr. Winder of the American Health Federation stated that it is our current estimation that some 50% of all female cancers in the Western world and about 1/3 of all male cancers are related to nutritional factors. So many illnesses today are caused by food, yet we rarely see any advocacy for food-based treatment. Now, with such high volumes of debilitating diseases afflicting American society today, it is critical to focus on one of the deadliest, heart disease. Heart disease kills thousands of Americans, yet no one confronts the underlying cause. In his educational book, Old MacDonald's Factory Farm, author David C. Coates asks a thought-provoking question that encourages higher contemplation over the demand of animal products. He says, since World War II, meat consumption per person has doubled in the US. Why is meat so high in demand when high consumption of all animal foods is now linked to degenerative disease, heart disease, stroke, cancer, arthritis, and many other problems. Since the consumption of animal products has increased significantly since the last World War, despite their unhealthy nature, Americans tend to receive treatment for the symptoms instead of abolishing the cause. Heart disease is caused by damage to the arteries, and diets with high amounts of animal protein and products also usher in huge amounts of cholesterol and saturated fat. Now, these substances build up in the arteries, creating plaque, which leads to the blockage of arteries and setting up for cardiac events because blood flow is blocked. The degenerative disease epidemic in the United States can be traced back to the food consumed, yet no warning signs warn the public concerning the detrimental consequences of eating such inflammatory foods on the daily. I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, an American heart disease physician, author, and former Olympic rowing gold medalist who has been featured in several documentaries about his groundbreaking work on reversing heart disease on a plant-based diet. He explained how meat has no fiber, is loaded with cholesterol, heme iron, and creates inflammation, and that a plant-based diet without any animal products, however, does the opposite by shrinking cholesterol and taking away inflammation. His scientific research over the course of several decades, as well as the first-hand testimonies of his patients, disproved the lies of the meat industry. Americans are being led astray by the lies, misinformation, and general propaganda of posters, ads, and commercials because they do not dig deeper into the true nature of their grocery purchases. In the enlightening documentary, What the Health, researcher and director Kip Anderson reveals his studies into the world of deceit and lies that the American meat industry has created. He shares how he discovered that the World Health Organization classifies processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same group as cigarettes, asbestos, and plutonium, and classifies red meat as a Group 2 carcinogen. The fact that the World Health Organization classifies meat as cancer-causing and as dangerous as cigarettes should be a well-known fact, yet there are no signs or anything warning the public about this. Even cigarettes get warning labels on their packaging. If meat has some of the same harmful qualities, where's the warning label, or even general knowledge? There is nothing beneficial about consuming meat, or the effects that the industries producing it has on our planet. Furthermore, the culture of animal agriculture, both nationally and globally, is a huge factor in the deterioration of our planet, which we are called to be wise caretakers of. Despite this destruction, the meat industry carelessly takes advantage of our limited natural resources, as well as contributing to climate change with the emission of more greenhouse gases than all the transportation sectors combined. Animal agriculture is a leading cause of rainforest destruction, species extinction, ocean dead zones, and freshwater consumption, as an insightful documentary explains. The industrialized process of meat production has dramatic consequences on our communal planet. Rainforests are cleared and destroyed in order to make room for farm animals to graze, which, in turn, deprives native species of their homes. Not only does it take away resources, but it also gives nothing in return, save for toxic pollutants that severely damage the environment. This lack of accountability concerning sustainability is what causes such widespread environmental damage. Author David C. Coates explains how the concentrated body waste of factory animals, laced with chemical residues, run off untreated into rivers and groundwaters. When slaughtered, the processing of their bodies contributes again to water pollution. This process of raising animals just to slaughter them creates major pollutants and emissions that contribute to the overall deterioration of ecosystems worldwide. Now, this contamination is so widespread that almost no environment is spared. Even if a small, organic family farm strives to raise their animal products clean and pure or without any chemicals or anything else, they can't be guaranteed to be selling completely 100% pure products. The massive industrialized animal agriculture business is basically always emitting toxins, polluting its surroundings with chemicals, and unfortunately, these contaminants don't just stay in one concentrated area. Now, Mike Ewell, the executive director of the Energy Justice Network, states that eating organic beef, poultry, pork, or fish will not help you avoid contaminants like mercury, like dioxins, like strontium-90, because they fall out over all sorts of farm fields and water bodies, and then they don't skip over the organic fields. The contaminants are coming in regardless of how these animals are raised. Now, in order to raise the billions of animals that the meat market today calls for, acres and acres of land is required. In fact, in the informative book, Back to Eden, the author outlines how, at the present time, nearly 1/2 of all land that is harvested in the United States is planted in crops that are fed to animals. This is taking place at a time when millions around the world are either starving or undernourished. And even though the vast amount of Americans get too much protein in their diet, starvation in the US remains a daily threat for thousands. Thousands and thousands of people, both globally and locally, here in Mason, Ohio, are on the brink of starvation, while the greed of the animal agriculture industry wastes huge amounts of edible grains and foods on animals instead of people. The issue with this is that 21 pounds of protein must be fed to cattle in order to get 1 pound of protein in return. This difference between the amount of protein fed to cattle and the amount returned comes to 48 million tons, enough to meet 90% of the world's protein deficiency. So instead of getting the nutrients directly from the earth in plant form, the animals, whose products are harmful for human consumption, their needs are elevated above the needs of God's image bearers who don't have enough food. Now, instead of cutting out the middleman, the animals, the overflow of plant products is deliberately given to animals who will give less nutrients in return. However, this industry is merely responding to the demands, and I hope to persuade you to lower these demands by discussing the ethical aspects next. Now, before I cover this next section, I want to make it clear that I will be covering some potentially disturbing themes and graphic imagery that might be sensitive to some people, so I wanted to let you be aware and give you the chance to prepare accordingly if you need to. Now, one of the most widely debated topics today, the rights and treatment of animals, is completely disregarded in today's animal product-focused culture. The demand forces us to evaluate our morals and to step out of our comfort zone in order to face the reality of this industry. Now, the controversial yet informative video, From Farm to Fridge, documents the cruelty that farm animals raised for food endure, starting with the egg industry. It relates how undercover investigators at egg farms from coast to coast have revealed a culture of cruelty and neglect, including workers stomping on birds, throwing live hens on dead piles and trash cans, and painfully mangling birds' spines in botched attempts to break their necks. Their short lives are marked by pain and harsh environments. They're crowded into tiny cages with hardly enough room to naturally develop or even spread their wings. Most of them never even see the sun. Even eggs, the smallest yet perhaps most used item in some people's refrigerators, are produced through suffering and cruelty. However, other products must be evaluated through the lens of compassion as well. Raised in factory farms, birds like chickens and turkeys are bred to grow very big, very fast, and often go through painful mutilations, such as having their beaks removed, with no anesthesia. Confined in cramped cages, they also suffer from multiple diseases and joint issues, as well as cardiac problems. Disturbing footage also reveals how sick and injured birds have their necks broken and others are clubbed to death. Now, if society reevaluated their stance towards factory farms, then suffering like this would be needless and non-existent. But as well as poultry, cows raised to provide beef and dairy, and pigs bred for meat suffer as well, all because of this industry's greed. Pigs are intelligent creatures. Some people keep them as pets and maintain that they are smarter than dogs. But unlike household pets, pigs that go on to become pork and bacon are all cruelly treated and mutilated, all in the name of profit. The same video outlines the life of a factory-farmed pig from birth to death, detailing the painful conditions of the tiny pens they are kept in, to the hurtful procedures they are forced to endure, such as having their tails cropped, again without anesthesia, or being forcefully tattooed with large metal spikes for identification. The footage also relates how, at a factory farm in Ohio, workers killed injured sows by hanging them on a forklift to be slowly strangled to death, a practice defended by the pork industry. Now, this disturbing fact was revealed as the result of an undercover investigation. Since this practice is defended by the pork industry, why should anyone support such a cruel and inhumane industry? These examples hopefully encourage some contemplation on the worth of all types of meat. However, it doesn't end there. Female dairy cows and cows bred for meat are also subject to torment and cruelty. In fact, in 2010, an undercover investigation at a dairy farm in Ohio revealed a farm worker stabbing cows with pitchforks, beating them in the head with crowbars, and punching baby calves. And yet another undercover investigation at a slaughterhouse in California revealed cows being kicked, shocked, pushed with forklifts, and water hosed in the mouth and nose in an effort to get them to the kill floor. Now, these horrific incidents occur because of the callousness and loss of empathy that we as a culture have developed. We are so set on animal products that we are willing to pay for and promote such violence and suffering. The desire for meat, dairy, and eggs is what keeps this business in business and practicing such cruelty, yet so many people are unaware of the actual process that their food goes through to reach their plate. A writer and travel photographer, Namit Arora, describes in his insightful article called On Eating Animals how Americans somehow don't realize that cruelty is the norm, not the exception, and is in fact infused into the very idea of factory farms. What makes meat cheap is the assembly line processing of animals who essentially subsidize it with their suffering. The price we pay for quick and easy animal products isn't found in a purse or a wallet and isn't in the form of paper or metal, but is instead the suffering and cruelty that farm animals experience, all for the sake of accessibility. As Christians, we need to examine what God's word outlines in order to discern a moral and ethical stance. As God's image bearers, we must be mindful of and practicing his attitude towards creation in order to glorify him in all that we do. If we as Christians support the animal agriculture industry, we are endorsing and encouraging cruelty towards his creation. We are called to have dominion over all of his creation, as outlined in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, where it says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth.'" When God created the earth, he gave mankind dominion over it, including the plants and the animals. But today, the word dominion has been skewed, and when we think of it, we usually think of tyranny and unrest and injustice. But these definitions today are not accurate to God's intentions. Today's culture sees dominion, and in some versions subdue, the same as abuse. But when thinking of dominion, we need to envision a wise ruler, ruling over his subjects with love, wisdom, and care, and not mistreating them and causing harm and damage. Being stewards of the earth requires wisdom and patience, not greed and cruelty. In fact, an article by authors John D. Anderson and Sean R. Milliken called A Biblical Perspective on Stewardship in the Context of Modern Livestock Production Practices provides a wise and insightful message. It says, "Overall scholarship on the cultural mandate presents a balanced view of mankind's exercise of dominion over nature through responsible stewardship as an integral aspect of reflecting the image of God. As God's image bearers, obviously we reflect his image, and being wise stewards is an incredibly important part of that. As Christians, we have a responsibility to treat his creation with care and respect. That includes both animals, ourselves, and the earth. As Milliken and Anderson wisely put it in the previously mentioned article, Christians need to reevaluate what it means to participate in animal agriculture in a God-honoring way. This is particularly true with respect to animal production, where high-intensity, large-scale production systems now dominate the meat, egg, and dairy industries. As Christians, we must rethink and recontemplate what eating animals and supporting these industries mean. Even for those who doubt the seriousness of such important issues that are caused by eating animal products, a different viewpoint needs to be adopted in order to be more aligned with God's plan for us to be benevolent image bearers. Now, some people do believe that the cutting out of all animal products from a diet would surely be bad for their health and must lead to an extreme deficiency of protein. However, to ignore the damaging effects of animal protein would be a foolish and unwise decision to make. This claim that a diet without meat and dairy would surely lead to an extreme deficiency in protein is partly true, because removing meat from your diet does remove a large portion of protein. However, as previously covered, animal protein does more harm than good to the inside of your body. And the many, many alternatives to meat and animal products is right in front of us. The current recommended allowance of protein for adults today, as outlined in the guide and recipe book by Nancy Addison, outlines how it is 46 to 56 grams per day. And most Americans today get around 100 grams of protein. So most people are actually suffering from an overdose of protein, not a deficiency. While arguments for the need of animal protein may seem like a good long-term solution, it is not sustainable at all. Consuming damaging food like this causes more harm than good, especially to our earth and ourselves, especially when there is an easy solution right at our fingertips. Beans, seeds, leafy greens, and grains, these are all sources of protein. Now, unsurprisingly, when people are looking to sustain themselves with protein, they often overlook how some of the strongest animals on Earth get their protein. Elephants, rhinos, even gorillas, all these huge, powerful animals, they are all predominantly vegetarian. As a result, we must do our best to be wise, responsible stewards of God's creation in order to preserve both our Earth and our future. Now, changing the world doesn't have to be a huge, grand event with excessive fanfare and celebration. By simply choosing wisely when it comes to animal products and bypassing them in favor of plant-based options, you can single-handedly change your own life when it comes to your health, the lives of millions of people affected by deadly pollution and climate change, and the innocent lives of billions of animals. All this can be achieved by simply reducing the demand for meat and dairy products. Now, I'm not asking you all to go out and protest in the streets or become one of those preachy vegans who shops exclusively at Whole Foods. I simply hope that my words today have opened your eyes, and if you feel the beckoning of change, then I invite you to learn more about this important issue. There are thousands of resources available online, at your local library, or even on social media. Change can take place slowly and gradually, or immediately at the drop of a hat. Either way, it's a journey, and providing the next generation with a clean, safe, cruelty-free, and healthy world is surely the greatest reward imaginable. Thank you.